Are you a professional pillow fighter? Or a 9-to-5 low-cost time travel agent? Or maybe real estate sales on Mars is your profession? It doesn't matter. Whatever it is you do, however complex or intricate, Monday.com can help you organize, orchestrate, and make it more efficient. Monday.com is the one centralized platform for everything work-related. And with Monday.com, work is just easier. Monday.com, for whatever you run. Go to Monday.com to learn more.
Well, I don't see the point in waiting any longer. So let's bring her out. The star attraction, the one you came to see. Ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only, Ms. Judy Gold.
You have said, wait, I have a little quote from you.
Oh, please.
Well, you know, I just wrote this. I have a book coming out in July.
Oh, that's great. Congratulations.
Thank you. Based on, it's called Yes, I Can Say That. When they come for the comedians, we're all in trouble. And it's freedom of speech. It's the First Amendment from the perspective of a comic.
Great.
And in it, it's basically a polemic, but in it, I do despise political correctness. Now,
Sure.
You have said you don't think it's a problem. And I want to say that I think it's a problem for comedy when people decide that a word is triggering and can't listen to the full idea. So you know, the context or the nuance or the intent of the comedian, you hear a word, you've decided on Monday that that's a bad word. And when you hear it on Wednesday, you know, even if it's in a different context, it's still a bad word. Do you know what I'm saying?
I 100%. Yeah. Can I?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh.
But the stuff the comedy that we heard, you know, Don Rickles would never make it today.
And if you were to do, if you like playing his album, his like first like Hello Dummy today,
Right.
like also I've listened to it recently. Like I think that Don Rickles is hilarious. In fact, can I tell you a personal story about Don Rickles that I have in my life
Yes!
after this? But I'll first say, like, I don't think that that album was of a time,
Right.
and it was, of course, funny and important, and the taboos that he was like branching out of, you know, that he was fighting
Right.
against at the time, like just like some of the jokes now to me sound like he's just saying like there is a black person here, like
Right.
almost like look at this guy, like, which he is, what he does is more nuanced than that. But if you look at some of his jokes on paper, I'd be like, if anybody did those jokes today, I'd be like, you are a dinosaur. You know,
Right.
like it's important to be growing as a comedian as well as a human being in society.
But
And I think
the climate was so much different then as well.
of course, like here, just to before I am seen as an anti-Rickles, I'm like, I don't think. I mean, he's gone now, so it's not certainly
Right.
like he's not canceled, uncanceled. What like I don't like. I also don't like when words are used, like when there's a word that's used, like, am I canceled or not? Is this politically correct or not? Because the wider truth is that it's a conversation. It's a conversation that needs to be had. It's a spectrum of like, there are some comedians who are using the N-word who I'd be like, I wish they didn't. There's some
Right.
comedians who are using it that I'm like, it makes sense that you're using it. Like Kamau Bell has a great joke about, I don't think he even says it in the joke, but he's
Right.
like, my white friends are like, when can I use the N-word? And he says, I'm like, whenever you are ready to deal with the consequences
Right.
of saying the N-word. And they're
Right.
like, oh, so I shouldn't say it? He's like, no, go ahead and say it if you want. Does anybody want to say it? You want to deal
Right.
with the consequences of saying it? And like that encapsulates a thing that I think is true. There's so many perspectives on this. And it's about, you know, I don't want people, I like when people are loving at their core. And when they express things that like, it's totally fine. Like I have family members or my girlfriend's family members who are Mormon. I have people my mother who I wouldn't recommend everybody's comedy to her because
Right.
it would make her feel away. And that's I think if she went and watched a show that I would love, I wouldn't recommend Doug Stanhope to her.
Right,
I love Doug Stanhope. But if she happened to see him, she might be like, oh, I didn't love, like I did a show with Doug. There's so many threads, but I did a show with Doug years ago at the Throckmorton. You ever go there?
I love the Throckmorton.
Oh, it's so wonderful. It was like right when the Satiristas book was coming out.
Right.
And it was like a Satiristas book release show. And Doug was headlining and he walked Mort Saul. Mort Saul Saul was
Wow.
at the show and
Yeah, he hangs out there a lot. Yeah.
and he was heard to say I didn't hear him, but somebody said that Mort Saul walking out on Doug Stanhope was saying something like, I know they can say whatever they want, but like,
Right.
do they have to? And
Right.
the perspective that I have is sincerely like, some people are like, I want to say whatever I want and not care what anybody else thinks.
Right.
I personally want to say whatever I want and also think about how other people feel. Like,
Right.
you can think about how people might feel. I mean, I think part of the job of comedian is to think about,
people think.
yeah, what the effect your words are going to have on a
Right.
person. And if I told a joke, there are jokes that I have told that I wouldn't tell again, now knowing how
Right.
it made a group of people feel
Right.
or specific people feel. It doesn't
I
mean
hear
that
that, yes.
I'm kowtowing. I'm not like giving them all the authority over what I say, but I'm including in all the things that influence me and what I want to do and what I decide to do. Like, I ultimately decide. Like, I have a new joke about my girlfriend and how she's helped me pick out pants. Like, she cares more what I look like than I do. And so I'm like, these are pants that I'm actually wearing them now. I get dressed to work for a podcast in these times.
Right.
And I'm wearing pants that are uncomfortable compared to my pajama pants. I could be wearing them and they're more uncomfortable than the pants I would choose. And so I'm like, nobody can make me wear pants I don't want to wear, even though these are pants that I wouldn't make myself wear. But I take my girlfriend's opinion onto what I look like and how I present myself into account, because I care about taking into account the opinions of people I respect, the value.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that about you. I mean, I love, because you're very into kindness. And okay, but wait, finish your Don Rickles thing.
Oh, of course. Yes. Thank you
Don
for
Rickles,
getting us
sorry,
back.
Don Rickles.
So
Go ahead,
this is, I've just been remembering this story and telling it more because I love it. This is, I think, when I was dating Micah Fox. She and I were, I think, with her mother. I think this is the group of people I was with, watching a Broadway show, like a matinee of Bye Bye Birdie that lasted a very short time. If I say this on stage, I'm like, it was like, hello, Bye Bye Birdie, and then bye bye Birdie, you know? And John Stamos was the lead. He played Conrad Birdie.
I'm making a face.
Wonderful face. I love it. That was like a perfect John Stamos doing Elvis sneer.
Yeah, but,
And so he was in it, and Gina Gershon was in it. And 20 minutes in, it was like the day, I think it was right before opening weekend. It was previews, and 20 minutes into the show, the set breaks and something falls apart. And we're like, oh God, was that? And they close the curtains, and John Stamos comes out and says to the audience, that wasn't supposed to happen. We're going to fix it. Thank you. We're still in previews, but in 20 minutes, we'll start up again. But in the meantime, I'll just kill this time with you. And in the audience, ultimately, he finds Bob Saget. He's like, Bob Saget's in the audience. Bob, do you want to come up here and tell some jokes?
Right.
And Bob does come up and tells some jokes into the microphone that is in his head. It's in his hair.
Right.
And so he's talking into Stamos' head for just a couple minutes until he realizes that Bob Saget doesn't have any jokes for a 2 p.m. matinee family-friendly show. And he's like, sorry. And the way the story really happened is this next thing happened first, but I like it better for the story.
Okay.
He says, Don Rickles is also in the audience. Don, would you like to come up here and like help entertain the audience? And then Don from his seat just immediately, no. Just the perfect, epitome, encapsulation of Don Rickles' essence of insult comedy in one syllable, 2 letters. Immediately, it was the funniest thing.
That's hilarious.
I remember that more than anything that happened in the play. 100%.
You know, I did Shakespeare in the Park a few years ago, and it was the all-female Taming of the Shrew, and I played Gremio, and the set would break. Like, it broke a handful of times. And I went out as my character and did stand-up because my character was based on Donald fucking asshole Trump. And it was amazing. It was amazing. But it's like, so those kinds of like doing stand-up in a circumstance where you're not expecting to do it is really, it makes you a better comic, A, and B, I mean, it's because I've been doing it for so fucking long that nothing throws me, you know?
Oh, sure. Of course.
I've seen it all. So that's an exciting part of it. But
Oh,
that's so funny about Don. Like, of course not, because he knew exactly what was going to happen, you know?
and oh yes. And can I say more about political correctness?
Yes, please.
So I think that like there's so many words that are possible to use to like capture the ideas of like how you want to do comedy. How like what is good comedy? It's funny, often it's irreverent, like Carlin was a person who said like the job of a comedian is to find where the line is and then
Right.
purposefully cross it. And here's the thing that he didn't say that I'll add to this Carlin thing, that the line, that whatever that line is is itself moving.
Oh, moves. Yes. It's fluid.
And
Yes.
that is why Don Rickles, what he did 50 years ago, he wouldn't do the exact thing that he did then now. And I remember Paul F. Tompkins, a comedian I love, like when asked this question, he is also he's an amazingly kind person and hilarious comedian. And I don't know if he doesn't swear at all, but like he isn't pushing the same envelopes that Stanhope or
Right.
you or like Carlin, but he is. I love his opening joke. He's like, I'm Paul F. Tompkins and I do Paul F. Tompkins based comedy. Like
Right.
he is so funny and so himself. And in a conversation once where I feel like the interviewer was like, do you dislike political correctness today and what it does? He said, well, I think that, it doesn't affect me in a negative way because this is what I'm doing. And
Right.
also he says, if you want to say only the exact same things in the exact same ways with the exact same language that you did 20 years ago, then you are a dinosaur. Because it's important as a human and an artist to be moving forward, not to say that society gets to determine what you can and can't say, because we live in a time now where, like Chappelle and Bill Burr are getting paid millions and millions of dollars to say, essentially, people don't want me to say everything, but I'm going to say it
Right.
anyway. And 50 years ago, Carlin and Lenny Bruce were literally going to jail
Right.
for saying things that...
Right. But you look at that, and I understand that, but it's even bigger than that, because once you get into, away from the semantics,
Yes.
right, and get to the, like the Nimesh Patel thing that happened at Columbia,
Yes.
where he's telling a joke that's so obviously about how hard it must be to be an African American or a person of color who's gay, and they're like, done, can't talk, and like they don't even get the fucking,
Oh yes.
and that's where it's bad.
I hear you. Yeah.
Problem.
There is an equilibrium, and it's important not to go too far. Like if you go too far in one direction, then it is hate speech. If you go, if there's actual, non-care for humans and for art and for comedy and for the joke and for yourself and the audience, and too far in the other direction, and then yes, you are assigning. It's essentially abusive in either direction, because it's just abuse to say like this was your intent. This is, if you like, so the idea is, of course, I think I'm pro listening to the whole story, listening to the whole joke, listening to the whole context, and then determining, like, after that point, like, I've told some jokes in the past about sexual assault that I might not tell today.
Right. There's plenty of jokes I wouldn't tell. Yeah.
But at the time, I thought like, oh, it certainly wasn't pro-victimizer, but it was perhaps, let's say, just neutral, and there was like funny joke logic. But to even bring up that topic, I think there now needs to be a certain bar cleared. Like I'll tell the best funny joke that I can about it if I think it's a funny enough and important enough joke.
Funny. It has to fucking be funny.
And like Sarah, can I say two more quick things about
of course.
this? Sarah Silverman. I know, I think is a perfect example of like the kindest person who historically said things that if you looked on paper at what she was saying, if you didn't know she was a satirist. And people could come to her show and be like, we didn't enjoy it because we didn't know what her intent was. Like if you're like, let's say an older person or a non-comedy savvy person, if you don't, if it's her show with her fans and her crowd, but there's just a couple people there that if you don't know what she's doing, then you might be like,
but
what?
You know, you're being kind as usual, because a lot of it also has to do with intelligence and ignorance.
Fair.
So you're saying, you know, you don't know the person, but a lot of times it's you're fucking dumb. You don't read the paper. You don't, you know, I don't know.
Sure. And I guess I'll segue into this final point about it, perhaps final quote unquote. But speaking of the paper, do you know Luisa Diaz? She is a comedy producer. She has a podcast called Why You Mad, which is great. And she posted something that I really liked that on her Instagram. I'll try to find it and send it to you. But it was from, I think, maybe one from each decade, going back maybe 50, 60, 70 years, an article where people are saying like the equivalent of that generation's is political correctness going too far. Comedians want to do whatever they want, but it is going in the face of indecency. And like, so there always have been people who are like, stop saying that. And there always have been people who are like, I'm going to say what I think is important and valuable and good to say.
That's in my book. A lot of that is in my book.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with a Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
I am fascinated that you being who you are, nerdy, vegan, kind, loving. I mean, I guess I shouldn't be that, but I am fascinated by your what is it? Ayahuasca?
Ayahuasca. Yeah.
Ayahuasca. Okay. Because my son Henry's like, Mommy, we are going away and doing ayahuasca. And I'm like, no, I'm not, because I'm too afraid, because I'm so fucking mental. But you go to these ceremonies and you trip. Like, what is it? Like, what the fuck is it?
Sure.
Does your mother know about this?
You know, so I talk about it extensively on the new album.
Right.
And I don't know if she's listened to the album yet, but I do know that she has seen me perform the material.
Right.
But I do think it's interesting now because my mom is seeing more of my shows now because she's getting more tech savvy, and now she can't see me live. So when she does sometimes. And so now I'm aware, and like she's started listening to podcasts, so she might listen to this, and I'm happy to talk with her about it, but it is not something that we like. I went to Peru for a week in like 2015. I think the first ayahuasca ceremony I did, most of them I've done in New York. Like the Peruvian guide lives in the Northeast of America, or previously did. And he would come to New York many times a year, like sometimes once a month.
Right.
And so I would do it in like, a quiet setting in New York City. And then he, a couple times a year, was like, come on a retreat if you would like to the jungles or the mountains of Peru. And I did that once. And so I went on this retreat.
Wait, how long is the retreat?
A week. It's, you get there and maybe over the course of a week, you do maybe 5-ish ceremonies, like 5 days in a row.
What's a ceremony?
A ceremony is you drink, you gather around with however many people there are. For the retreat in Peru is maybe 12 people. The smallest group I ever did it with was 4. Sometimes it's as many as like 25 or 30, like depending on the space and how many assistants there are. But mainly this one guide, the ayahuasquero, I think sometimes he's referred to as. I've only done it with this one guy. So where do you stay? Do you stay like in tents or? When we did it in Peru, we were staying at like a lodge, kind of like a very like no electricity. There was electricity, no Wi-Fi.
So it's not fancy.
No. It was like the door doesn't click shut,
Okay, so
like a
I'm
summer
like
camp
a
bunk.
little jappy. So
Yeah.
okay.
there are, the way when Chelsea Handler did it with whoever did it with her,
Right.
probably also from Livingston, she probably, didn't do it necessarily. I mean, you don't have to do it outdoors. Like
Right,
there
I
are,
got ya.
in fact, one time after a ceremony in New York, somebody asked the guide, do you think that doing it in the jungle is more authentic, is more genuine or valuable in a way? And there, the guide said, the experience happens in your consciousness. So it doesn't actually matter where you are
Right, where you
physically.
are.
And in
Okay.
fact, the jungle can be loud. So this space
Right.
can be better, for your focus than the jungle, possibly.
Okay.
But yeah, so I went away for those 7 days, and I told my family, I didn't lie to them. I just said, I'm going on this meditative retreat. So if they asked questions, I would answer them, but I didn't volunteer any more information at the time. Though I will say, before I did ayahuasca, I had some experience with mushrooms. Since I was maybe 25, I didn't smoke pot till I was like 24.
Right.
And then I did mushrooms when I was 25. And I was like, oh yeah, this is a valuable experience, a valuable tool in a way. Maybe I didn't think of it as that at the time, but I would do mushrooms a few times a year maybe. And then I would talk about that on stage. And I remember one time my mom after a show was like, what are mushrooms? And then one time I talked about them on a podcast and posted about it on Facebook. And my grandmother, who at the time, my grandmother was on Facebook for a lot of the last 10 years of her life, 15 years of her life. And she would comment on so many of my things that I would put on Facebook. And so she saw that I talked about mushrooms on a podcast. And she's like, what are these? And I was like, oh, they're a non-addictive, hallucinogenic substance that I engage with once in a while. And she's like, oh, good. As long as it's not addictive. And so...
Oh, I love her.
And so I think I shared that similarly with my mom. Like my mom, grew up, born in the 50s, grew up in the 60s. And I don't know what her experience was like, but from the talks that I've had with her, she did not do, I believe, a lot of mental exploration via these tools. And so that's what I was raised with. I was raised like, don't drink, don't smoke, don't do drugs.
Same.
And I've never smoked a cigarette because now as an adult, I'm like, oh, I don't know what value I would get from it.
Zero.
Whereas with pot in college,
Yes.
I saw some friends who did it, and I was like, okay, I don't judge my friends for doing it, but I'm not going to do it myself.
Right.
But it was when I got married in my 20s, the person that I married, she was very into pot at the time, like creatively. She was like a musician, and she's like, I create when I am under the influence of this substance.
Right.
And it is a valuable help.
And I'm sure Shakespeare, I mean, come on. They gotta be. First of all, you were married in your 20s?
Oh yeah. I wouldn't recommend that, but
How old were you?
We got married at 25. I was 25.
And how long did that last?
About 3 years.
Was she Jewish?
She was half Jewish, half Italian.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Yes.
Okay. So, all right. So
I'm doing pot and then mushrooms.
Yeah.
And so little by little, I think it's good to tell children, be like, hey, don't do pot like when you're too young, because it actually has like a scientifically, empirically studied impact on your brain and like impact on potentially the IQ. And so I'm like, yeah, like alcohol, there's an age after which we're like, okay, you're a responsible adult. Like, but please, but it's weird because, in Italy or wherever in Europe where they're like, you could, hey, give your kids some wine, let them learn, demystify it. Right. At least like I had a little beer that an adult gave me when I was 13. I'm like, gross. And so like, I don't drink alcohol anymore at all. But for most of my, when I got into comedy is when I really started drinking, because you're paid with drink tickets. And Rick Jenkins after the shows at the Comedy Studio is like, what would you like? And I'm like, well, I don't like the taste of this poison, but I'll take an amaretto sour. But I was only doing it, like, again, not mindfully, just because it was there. Right. So that's the same way from the other direction that I was like told not to do drugs, not to drink, that eventually I learned that I am allowed to and encouraged to like think for myself and like try different things. As long as I've never tried heroin because I'm like, I know through research, through other people's stories and
please, you cannot try heroin.
And the reason for that is I saw this scale, this spectrum of drugs from pot to heroin. As far as like pot on one end is like the amount that you need to get high is so far away from the amount that you would need to kill you. Like there's a certain amount of any substance, including water, that will kill you eventually if you have too much of it. Heroin, they're so close. So heroin is of any substance that will mess you up, that will make you hallucinate, that'll alter your mind. Like every substance alters your mind. Heroin, it's so close, and that's why people overdose on it more than they do pot or cocaine or even alcohol. Like alcohol and cocaine are in the middle. Like to have the effects, like you're risking some measure of alcohol poisoning or a cocaine overdose. Whereas like mushrooms and pot, and then I think LSD, like, who knows? I feel like the LSD making people like think they can fly and jump off buildings. I think that's like anecdotal fear stories that are less likely to be like the common experience. But certainly mushrooms and pot are at the most innocuous end of the spectrum. And that's part of like when I came from this, environment where I was so sheltered and being like, you're so important. You are everything. You are the world. And so don't, your body is your temple. Don't put any toxins in your temple. Yeah. And then I eventually, as I became an adult, I was like, oh yeah, my mind did expand. Even without the substances, I was like, it expanded to include like, oh, maybe this substance, like one of the reasons I didn't smoke pot was because I was like, what if I have kids and I want to tell them truthfully that they shouldn't and I never did? And now I don't worry about that for many reasons. Yeah. And I think it's fine to be like, because if people think like that, do you think that way about alcohol? How am I going to tell my kids that I'm a hypocrite? You know what I mean? Like, and you're just like, I'm a hypocrite and you're going to be one too, but I care for your safety. And so
don't do this.
Be careful with your brain and body. Yeah.
Okay. So you go to Peru.
Yes.
I just want to know, you take a drink?
Yes. So yeah, to answer your question of what the ceremony is like, the first times that I did it were in New York. So I would show up to whatever yoga studio, dance studio, art space, where it's been a few different places. You show up at like, let's say 8 p.m. And then at 9 p.m, maybe the guide has arrived and is starting to like greet everyone informally. Then like you're sort of like lining the room, like sort of like a semicircle around. He's at one end and that's like a circle. And you're sitting maybe on a yoga mat, or if you have blankets or a pillow, you start out seated. And then he'll sort of introduce what's going to happen for people who don't know. And then it's kind of like a communion. Like he does a couple of like smoke blowing rituals of like protection of the place, I believe, and then, and sort of you get this smoke blown in your area. And then at the end of the ceremony, there's like another smoke blowing to like the closing of that parenthesis. And like, I'm not I didn't grow up a completely like a religious practicing Jew, but like, I like the ceremonial aspects of it. It's nice that this is the thing that happens. This is the thing that happens every time. And so then you go up one by one, like he drinks a little bit. It's like, just like a shot glass that he fills halfway or all the way or only a little bit, depending like if he knows you, if he knows what your tolerance is. If you're new, he starts very small, and then you go and you drink it, and then you go back and you sit, and then everybody drinks, and then the lights turn out, and then when he starts feeling the effects, rings a chime, that like a bell that starts the ceremony, and then he guides it with these chants or songs that are called Icaros, that are these ancient Quechua language or Spanish or other languages, occasionally English, but usually another language that it's good if you don't understand it, because it just sort of impacts maybe the pineal gland and your mind, your consciousness, your heart, whatever, you hear it. And then the goal is to either just like be with it or follow it. And then some people go in with an intention or with questions to answer. My guide has said like, no need to have any expectations. Like it'll help tell you where you are, like a spiritual GPS, like whatever's going on within you that is important to address will arise. And there may be visual hallucinations that those are not the point. Those are like the framework upon which the tapestry of your emotional, spiritual work experience, is drawn or appears or arises. And then, for the next 3 to 5 hours, like it comes on for some people slow. For me, it sometimes takes like an hour to fully kick in. You might feel these pre-epiphanies for a little while, I call them. But then maybe an hour in or some amount of time in, he'll say, if you're not feeling the effects, you can come up and have another shot. So some people take 2 shots. Like that's usually the maximum that people will want or need. And then, yeah, it's
And
sort
how
of like,
long does it last?
So the experience of the ceremony, like he'll close it maybe it'll go from 10 p.m. till between 1 and 2. So I'd say between 3 and 4, 3 and 5 hours, you might still be feeling the effects depending on how much you'd eaten that day, on how much you'd taken that night. Sometimes there have been times where it has lasted much longer. Like sometimes I'm like, you're then able to stay there and there's like a time to relax and come down and break the fast. You've been fasting for most of the previous day. And then you gather in the other room where people are still resting in that room. And so then I'd say I'll sometimes stay there till it could be 3 in the morning, 4 or 5, every once in a while. And this hasn't happened in a while, but when I was first starting out, maybe I would take more than I needed. Maybe I didn't need the second shot, but I'm like, I want to get all of the enlightenment that I paid for, which is not like that's with mushrooms that I used to be like that also. Like if I had a small amount of mushrooms, I would think like, I don't have another source for this. I can either take them all or I can share them with some people. And now I much prefer to share. I'd be like, I'd rather have a smaller shared experience than like an out of this galaxy, me alone, possibly terrified experience. But at the time, sometimes I would be there till 6 in the morning being like, I can't yet move.
And then then you're done?
Then I'd say the first time that I did it, I came down, I went home, and then I went to sleep. And then the next couple days, I was experiencing the impact of like the things I'd been feeling and thinking about still, but definitely it was still in the headspace of that experience. And I would even, when I would wake up, because the experience is very dreamlike, like if you want to compare it to anything else, like when you come out of it, it's kind of like waking up and like, how when you wake up from a dream, the details might start to fade.
Yes.
But you have general feels, the general shape of it.
Yes.
You might try to be like, I'll write this down now before I forget. And so for the next couple days after my first time, when I woke up, I would feel my body crackling with the energy that I felt during the experience. And then I could it was sort of like, like in meditation, if you meditate later in the day, you might remember to breathe the way that your meditation offers you. And you're like, oh yeah. So, in some ways it has given gifts that, offer like valuable life coaching or death coaching, throughout the rest of my memory up until now, including now. But I would say practically speaking, the effects last like there's a peak of like what I've heard is maybe only 20 minutes, but the time dilates and who knows how much it feels like. It might feel like forever, but then over the 3 to 5 hours, there's that time period. Then there's like the day leading up to and coming down from it. But yeah, I would say and there's sometimes it lasts for days, like, but not like you couldn't drive a car a few days later, but you definitely are still continually having things like bloom and burst.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can handle it.
But to answer your question of how, or the topic of why it might seem incongruous that I am a person who, was by the book, literally books are my life. But
you're also, you explore things and so
I opened the book.
I could see wanting to know all that. This week's episode of It's Judy Show with Judy Gold is sponsored by BetterHelp. And if you know me, which I think you do because you're listening to my podcast right now, you know that I am a big advocate for therapy. I think it benefits everyone. I think there's so many people who need it, who don't partake. It is so important for your emotional health and well-being. Therapy is fantastic. It is in every stretch of the imagination. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, please do it. But please give BetterHelp a try. It is entirely online. It's designed to be convenient. It's flexible. It suits your schedule. You fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. I have switched therapists in my life. I've had many, many therapists, and sometimes it's not a great fit for you, but don't give up. Therapy is beneficial. You can learn about yourself, you can process, and just be emotionally healthy. I'm telling you, do it. BetterHelp is great because, when I used to schlep to my therapist's office, it was so annoying. You have to do it, and you sit there and you wait, and then I'm telling you, doing it online is fantastic. And BetterHelp is amazing. I know a lot of people who've used it. So if you're thinking about therapy, go to betterhelp.com. Let the gratitude flow. This is gratitude month, people. So you need to let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Judy Gold, JudyGold, today, and you will get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Judy Gold. You're welcome. I always ask my guests 2 questions.
Yes.
Okay? And so you're going to have to fucking endure that. All right?
I accept.
First of all, we're very into mental health, which we just spoke about. So I suffer from anxiety, depression. It's every Jew, my grandparents were cousins Jew.
You suffer from Judaism, yeah.
I suffer from major Judaism. Anyway, so what besides DMT or what is it? It's
DMT, yeah.
Ayahuasca.
Yes.
What else do you do for your mental health? Have you ever been on antidepressants? We're very pro mental health. Go ahead.
I have gone to therapy. I have not taken
therapy.
Yeah, I've not taken any medications for my mental health,
right.
other than, maybe like homeopathic type things,
right.
like vitamins. My girlfriend is very into, herbal essences. That's a shampoo, but those things, she like right now I'm actually wearing a cologne or some kind, like it's
right.
It's nice to smell away, and like essential oils. That's the
right.
So, but I remember when I first went to therapy, the very first time I went to therapy was with my parents when they were in couples counseling before they got divorced, and I fell asleep. And then when I went to therapy in college, my therapist was like, "Oh, I would have yelled at that therapist like for allowing you to sleep through therapy, because that wasn't a good therapy thing to do." But my goal in therapy, one of the things that I went for was I up until very recently, and still sometimes, bit my nails.
Same.
And I don't know, I'm one of the only people. I would love to find other people who also have this, but I stopped biting them while I was awake, but I kept biting them in my sleep up until a year or 2 ago when I got from the dentist a mouth guard for my teeth grinding. It had the secondary benefit of stopping me from being able to.
Oh, that's amazing. But that's one of the most that's the most common form of anxiety is this. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And so I was doing it my whole life. My grandmother,
amazing.
My grandmother offered to she was like, buy me off. She's like, I'll give you $50 to spend at Toys R Us if you stop. Yeah.
My mother, Judith, I'm getting you gloves.
Ha ha.
White gloves.
I got those horrible tasting things that,
Yes. My father, that was horrible.
I would wake up with no nails and a horrible taste in my mouth. Here's a quick funny thing about my grandmother, and this is she worked as a nurse for a dermatologist's office for almost 40 years. And one of the things that I remember her telling me is if a child came in with a wart or any warts, she would then say to the child, "Can I buy that wart from you for 25 cents?" She would give them a quarter, and then the wart would be gone the next day.
That is
the power of it's the placebo power of mental belief.
You're not kidding.
So I remember when I first went to therapy in college of my own volition,
right?
My desire for it, my goal of it, I'm a psych major, which means I'm a student. I don't know everything about it, but I wanted to tell, I want to tell him everything that happened in my life. And I want to tell him everything that I'm thinking. And I want to have him be like, that makes sense. That is normal. You're all set. But, I would only go to therapy as an adult when I had insurance for it, like when I did enough TV a year that I had good SAG-AFTRA insurance.
Right.
And I went when I was dating a woman who I wasn't sure if we had the kind of relationship that I wanted to. So I never went just for, talk therapy for like maintenance. I only went for specific needs and desires. But what I do for, I think, my mental health and or caring for myself in these ways is I wake up. A valuable thing I read once that my girlfriend introduced this book into my life by a guy named Alan Cohen. I forget the name of the book, but it's like every day. Oh yeah. Every day, like an affirmation or a meditation or a lesson or a fable, right? Where one of the days, it really sticks with me and I love it so much, is talking about the formative years of your life and how, of course, if a baby doesn't get enough physical touch, enough nutrition, enough of its needs met, enough of its care supplied, that sets you up. Like if you get all that care that you need in the first 2 years of your life, it doesn't mean you have the best life, but you're set up for success way more than if you don't. And he says that, Alan Cohen says, the formative minutes of your day are also like that. That if you wake up and immediately plunge into like the social media hellscape, the news and internet and computer and everything. Like, so he says, if you start your day with, if it's prayer for you, if it's meditation, if it's running, if it's reflection, if it's whatever it is that you're like, I'm mindfully taking this time. So that's why I start most days when possible. I wake up and now I'm drinking water because a couple days ago, my girlfriend's big on water and she has this book all about all of the things that can befall you, all the physical ailments that just drinking water might prevent. Like just a few nights ago.
Oh, water is so important.
I was overwhelmed with, it didn't even make any sense. Like we both had no rational explanation until she was like, did you drink enough water today? And I was like, I literally did not. And so now I have these big jugs of water that I usually keep nearby me that I'm drinking 3 a day. So now you're the first person I'm telling my newest.
Oh my God, I'm so excited.
Ritual is I wake up and I drink this maybe a liter of water. And while I'm drinking the liter of water, I'm reading right now a book by Ram Dass. Sometimes it's a book by Pema Chodron or Thich Nhat Hanh or Lama Yeshe, a spiritual teacher, a Buddhist writer. And so that's the first words, that's the first concepts that are going into my being of the day. Water into my body, Buddhism or spirit into my spirit. And then after I drink it, after I finish a chapter or a few pages, then I meditate. I sometimes use Headspace. I sometimes use Insight Timer.
Yeah, I use Insight Timer,
and then I'll do that for between 10 and 20 minutes. And then I will do morning pages, like a la the artist's way. I go to 750words.com and I just write sometimes like just gratitude for myself, sometimes an email to my girlfriend or my mom, sometimes comedy, sometimes lyrics, just anything. And that's the way that I start my day. And and these days, now that it's been getting nicer out, in New York, we just moved a few months before the quarantine into a downstairs apartment that has backyard, like garden access.
Oh, that's perfect. Where are you? What part?
Park Slope. I am in Park Slope.
Okay. Short Hills, Park Slope.
I don't own any of these places, but I
had a girlfriend who lived in Park Slope.
Sure.
And I used to call it no Park Slope because you could never fucking find a parking spot. Okay.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So
I sit outside and get nature, and then walking is another big one.
Yes, big one.
Walking, even just 20 minutes. I try to do 40 minutes when I can, but just walking. Sometimes now I'll be on the phone with my mom or another friend.
You got to move. Very healthy. Now, before I get to my final question, I just have 2 comments.
Yes.
First of all, Comedian's National Anthem that you did with Micah Sherman.
Oh, yeah.
Fucking hilarious.
Thank you so much.
One of my favorite things in the whole world.
I really appreciate it.
And then I was thinking, I wanted to write another verse. Okay. And then it says on your website that you're polyamorous.
That is something that was true at a time, and I am now in what I call a mindfully monogamous relationship. In that, everyone who grows up in our society, in our culture, is like, I was given all the same media and stories. Like, oh yeah, like certainly in my family, I was given heteronormative examples of like, you're a man, you grow up, you marry a woman, the end. And then when I got married, I was actually married to a woman who identified as queer. And she was the first person to introduce the concept, the word of polyamory to me. And I didn't want it. I didn't think, I was like, no, thank you. I was afraid of it. But towards the end of our marriage, we did open our relationship in a way that you often see and people blame for marriages falling apart when people are like, oh, the open relationship didn't work. That's right. They don't work. When most relationships don't work.
Period. But so wait, polyamorous doesn't mean you're like a throuple. It means you go
it
out.
Could.
Oh, it could.
Yes. Yeah. Polyamory. Yeah.
On your own.
Yeah. I'd say the largest umbrella term is either openness or non-monogamy.
Okay.
And so that can be like swingers are non-monogamous, but they're doing it all together, right? They're not going on their own. Or like just having a threesome is non-monogamous.
Right.
Because that's inviting one person in once in a while, but it's still you doing it together. Whereas polyamory, it does come from like the Latin and Greek for many loves. So it is more than just a two-person relationship, which could be a married couple where they each have their own separate relationships, or it could be a throuple or a quad or some combination of multiple loving romantic relationships.
Okay.
And
thank you for that explanation.
So I have after I was married, I wrote this joke, which was the truth, that I was like, I don't think I could be with just one person unless I'm looking for the one that will let me be with others.
That's good. I like that.
Thank you. And so I was looking for the right kind of open relationship.
Right.
And so I was looking for other people, either trying to talk to people who liked me about being in the kind of relationship I wanted, or finding people who wanted that kind of relationship and seeing if they wanted to be with me. And so there was a lot of trial and error. And ultimately, the relationship that I'm in now started when I was in relationship with another person at the end of another relationship that was open. And we just started, I met my girlfriend, we started seeing each other. I talked to her about openness and my connection to it, my desire for it. And she was it made sense. She was on board.
I love that.
And then my other relationship ended for its own reasons. And then we kept being single and or dating, each other and other people for a while. She was then in a monogamous relationship at a point. And then after that, now close to 3 years ago, I guess exactly 3 years ago now, she exited that other monogamous relationship, came back into my life experience relationship. And we have been together and we've been living together, and we've been having these conversations about what we want our relationship to be, how we want it to be. And now finally I'm at the place where I feel like people were always wrong to tell me this, like older like authority figures in my life, people I love and respect, but who weren't open relationship people. They'd be like, when you find the right person, then you just know. But I wouldn't have found this person if I didn't take all the steps I did and had all the openness in my life that I did at the time to know that now this is actually still an ever opening experience, even though we are together, only us, and I want to be, and I'm happy to be. And it's
great.
Yeah. So yes, for a time, I would say that I was like now culturally polyamorous.
Right.
And like I totally,
but practicing monogamy.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Here's my final question.
Yes.
The podcast is called Kill Me Now because I get so fucking mad about so many things, especially injustice. But I want to know what pisses you off more than anything in the entire world.
Oh, sure. I mean, a challenging question for me, a person who doesn't even like to say that he has a pet peeve, because pet peeves themselves are
anti-animal.
And but here's a thing that I talk about sometimes that I haven't thought in a while, but I like in my comedy and in my life to focus on the little good things and the big bad things, like to be grateful for the small things that I have. Because if you're too loud about the gratitude for the big things, like I just got this big thing, but if you're grateful for small things that you have, that almost everyone I think could have something small that they're grateful for, something small and positive. But then on the flip side, if I'm complaining about small things, then I myself will feel ungrateful compared to all of injustice, of course, like the big bad things.
I mean, I'm saying there are specifics, but it's like, that's the thing. Like things that are not fair, or people who are incompetent or don't try or are not curious or like,
Sure. I mean, and here's
thoughtless.
the thing is that I've learned also, my girlfriend shared this with me. I don't know where she received it from, but we see the world not as it is, but as we are,
Right.
And so there's so often a time when people are like unconsciously like projecting, like when the president says the Democrats are lying and stealing and cheating. And you're like, oh, is that what the Democrats are doing?
That's what you're fucking right.
And so I want to be or even my grandmother, but beloved grandmother who hated Trump, and she'd be like, he's an asshole and a name caller. And I'm like, hold on, grandma, like when you're calling him a name caller. So I'm very conscious that the things that bother me the most must also be things that are within me. So like I've gotten into a conversation recently about white supremacy, about, white people killing black people. And that when I'm talking with certain white people about it who I'm not perfect. I'm still growing. I also don't have the requisite non-white direct lived experience that non-white people do. And so it can be an extremely frustrating thing to go from communities where, I mean, with you, you're a person who understands, like you're a woman, you're, if I'm correct, a queer person, like you have experiences, like you're not a person of color, but you are a Jew, and you're all of these other groups that have experienced various kinds of, oppression and offense. And so you can, like, my girlfriend is like, I'm a white person, but I'm a woman. And so at least she's like, I know that there are things that people of color are experiencing that I'm not experiencing, because I know that I'm experiencing things as a woman that non-women are not experieing.
Right. But they experience it just because of the color. Like they can't hide it. Like I could hide being I wouldn't hide being a lesbian, but it's just fucking like, the guy's running. He's jogging down the street like, he has every fucking right to jog down the street and look at a construction or get a couple of it's fucking like, I can't. It's so upsetting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It is more. I mean, I'm grateful that I'm set. Like, this is a complex emotional cocktail, because like my comfort is like an inheritance of my whiteness. Like even to be able to not think about that, to not think about this all of the time is a luxury, is part of the privilege. And
I mean, to be I have two sons, and I can't even imagine if I had to say, and so many mothers have to say to their kids, like, just, be careful when you're driving. Like, don't look at anyone. Don't make, like, fuck.
Yeah. And my parents are telling me, don't do marijuana because like it won't harm you almost in any way. Like, I'm so sheltered from things that don't need sheltering, and other people have to be sheltered from these horrors. That there's this Doug Stanhope joke that I love, where he says something like, I'll yell at you today for not knowing something that I just learned yesterday. And so that's what I feel about this work that is ongoing, and learning like how much it's important to, amplify voices of people who have different experiences and contribute money and time and energy as much as is possible. And so, and then to be then surrounded by communities of people like my friends and many comedians and non-comedians, and a lot of it's not just preaching to the choir, but it's great that this choir does exist, of support, of being like, let's help each other, help everyone as much as we can. And then to talk to a person who is not as far along the path as, I became a week ago. And you're just like, how do you not like there? I'm like, how are you exactly the same? Like before I became vegan, I wasn't vegan. Before I became vegetarian, I wasn't vegetarian. So that's why I don't yell at people when they're living how I lived before I had those experiences.
You're pretty healthy.
I am, and I'm yelling about it now, but only in this safe yelling. Your home is a safe yelling space. But yeah, I mean, it is incredibly, I get worked up when I get into, like, I try not to get into too many, what I think of as unnecessary, pointless, like internet battles, interactions. Like I used to write back to everybody all the time.
You can't do that. I'll make you fucking crazy.
So there's now like the limited few, the people who like I care about and who I think I might be able to have an impact on, and who are also there are people armed with arguments that it's important to be able to dismantle, like along with like white supremacy at large. Like if they're not going to listen to, okay, white supremacy is bad. Like if they're not already on board with that, then you're like, okay, I as a white person have to start from the bottom and be like, how do I drag you from this pedestal that is your racial, like just hereditary birthright, that
Yes.
like, hey, come here. So that is a frustrating thing in my experience.
Well, I have to say, you are a delight.
The same.
It was so great talking to you. I had so much fun.
Thank you.
I want to do ayahuasca, I think.
At any point that it's happening again, I'll certainly be in touch. And
but I'm not telling anyone. I'm not telling anyone.
Yes,
okay?
I hear you completely. Right. I thank you so much for having me here. And it's been a pleasure to have this conversation.
And everyone, where can everyone find you? MYQ. That's how he spells his name. MYQ Kaplan.
Yeah, all the social media of Myq Kaplan.
Get your new album, AKA.
Yes, it is available. If you're listening to a podcast, you can probably find the album, but iTunes, Apple Music, all the places.
And it's great. And
thank you, Judy.
Brilliant. And I can't wait to work together.
The same.
And thank you for not keeping my joke.
Oh, of course. Thank you for, it was like, what do you call it? It was like training wheels for me briefly, I put them on and I'm like, I'm going. And then I was able to balance on my own with my own jokes. And I was like,
and here you are.
Thank you, Judy. This has really been a pleasure.
It was great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to part 2 of Kill Me Now with Myq Kaplan. If you like the show, how could you not? Make sure to subscribe and leave a review. Please leave a review. I want 5 stars, okay? It helps more people find this amazing show. 5 stars only, please. Also, if you have not had the chance to pre-order my new book that I'm very proud of, it's called Yes, I Can Say That. When they come for the comedians, we're all in trouble. It is available for pre-order right now. It'll be released to the general public on July 28th. Booklist, which is an excellent website, says that my book, Yes, I Can Say That, is a powerful and powerfully funny argument in support of how vital free speech is to comedy and comedy is to us. Okay? Come on. That's damn good. So there you go. It would mean so much to me if you would check it out. And you can pre-order anything that I have. All the pre-order links are on the homepage of judygold.com or wherever you buy your books. Always, please, I know I say this every week, make sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram for all of my upcoming virtual dates at Judy Gold, JEWDY GOLD. Get it? Jew Gold, because I'm Jewish. Anyway, got a lot of fun stuff coming up. So thank you. Please stay safe. Please stay well. And I'll talk to you soon. And as we always say, so long!
And everything was wonderful. I'll see you soon. Thank you for the visit. So long.